Hi, I'm Tim Hampton. On today's Repeatable Genius video, we're going to look at 7 ways that Tesla comes up with ideas. In a recent blog post, I wrote about Scamper, which is an ideation technique, an idea generation technique that emerged in the 50s, and it consists of 7 different ways to look at a problem and come up with ideas. It's been boiled down to the word scamper, which is a mnemonic. A mnemonic is a way to remember multiple things by putting them into an acronym. So the word scamper is spelled S-C-A-M-P-E-R, and each one of those is a letter that is attached to a word that will help us to come up with different ideas. When generating a new idea, when trying to settle on something to try in any organization, whether you're identifying your mission statement or even the smallest task that would help you contribute to that mission. The first step is to come up with many ideas on how to proceed, and then you go ahead and narrow down. There's no point in going wide if all the ideas you come up with are very similar. Scamper, with its 7 different approaches, is useful because it helps us look at a problem in many different ways and come up with what you would hope would be a wide variety of solutions. So the first letter in Scamper is S, and S stands for substitute. Elon Musk has said that the goal for the company Tesla, the auto manufacturer Tesla, is to get us off our reliance on fossil fuels. The purpose of Tesla is to substitute electric propulsion for gas-powered propulsion. Not only is this an innovation, that we're replacing an existing energy source with another, or an energy storage system with another. But it gets to the idea that the substitution that one can make is not only an idea, but it could also even be the mission of your entire company. The second letter in the word scamper is C. C is for combine. So the idea generation there is, can you look at the problem you have or the opportunity you have and combine 2 things together to make a new solution? A good example of this is the clock radio. You have a clock, you have a radio, and yet putting them together makes a better product than either one separately. The Tesla Model X combines the windshield with the sunroof, and this gives a continuous piece of glass, and people say that it's quite an experience. It feels like you're in a fighter plane. And it also addresses the fact that the unusual configuration of the rear doors means that the roof above the rear passengers, you can't put a sunroof in there. The letter A in Scamper stands for adapt. And what you're doing with adapt is you're looking outside your industry or outside your company for some process or technique or idea that you can adapt to your own product or service. In this case, Tesla has adapted the technique of over-the-air updates. We're familiar with our computers and our phones updating their software automatically if they're connected to the network. Tesla cars are connected to the network through a wireless connection. This allows Tesla to update its software at any time. So if they come up with improvements or address problems that previous versions of the software had, they can immediately publish that to the cars. And this is something that the automotive industry has never done before. It's an adaptation of a technique taken from the high-tech world. The letter M in Scamper stands for modify, minify, or magnify. Taking the example of magnify, you can see a striking example in Tesla's Gigafactory. Elon Musk has said that if you look at the material costs of a battery, they aren't terribly expensive. The materials are not what is making the batteries expensive. What's expensive is actually building the batteries. And so by building the Gigafactory, Tesla is able to take advantage of economies of scale. They produce so many batteries that the manufacturing cost is relatively small. So this is a good example of using the principle of magnification to come up with new ideas. On the flip side, an example of minify that Tesla has used is something that's actually got them criticized. The Tesla Model 3 has been assessed very carefully by competitors, and they found that the body, the chassis itself, is made up of an unusually large number of metal stampings. For example, the inside of the wheel arch on a typical vehicle from a typical manufacturer might be 1, maybe 2 parts. But in the Tesla, it's 8 parts, all welded together or glued together, fastened together. And that is contrary to a lot of the best practices in manufacturing. Manufacturers tend to want to use a minimum of parts because it's easier to ensure that they line up correctly, that they don't leak, that you have a more reliable, less squeaky product. So to produce a car out of so many parts, you have to wonder what Tesla is thinking. My assumption is that because they rushed the car to market, they rushed it with the plans not fully done. So they always had the intention of creating an all-wheel drive version, but they started with a rear-wheel drive only version. My theory is that they produced the car not knowing what every variant would require in terms of the floor plan design. And so they kept the parts small, like a jigsaw puzzle, so that it's modular. They can switch out parts as they finalize their design without a great expense, because the stampings themselves may be relatively inexpensive, but the stamping machines, the dies, those are prohibitively expensive. So you don't want to change your mind very often, especially with big dies. So this allows them to have the flexibility to change one portion of the floor pan, for example, and not cripple themselves financially. It gives them flexibility. Another example of minify that lets Tesla keep their flexibility high is they actually are building Model 3s in a tent, which is another thing that caused some humor at their expense. But if you think about it, it's a perfect example of keeping your costs to a minimum and keeping your flexibility to a maximum. A tent, after all, can be set up relatively inexpensively. You can expand it, you can shrink it, you can reconfigure it, you can put new doors into it. Whatever you need to make the assembly line within run efficiently, even if you're wrong in your initial design, you have the flexibility to rethink things and make the changes in a way that if you had a building that was brick and mortar, it would be prohibitively expensive to make those changes over and over. The P in Scamper stands for put to another use. And it's one of my favorite idea creation or idea development principles. And you can see a lot of it coming out of Tesla and SpaceX as well. It seems to be their favorite. A very good example of put to another use comes again with the Model 3. The Model 3 was initially released without a feature to turn on the wipers automatically when it rains. This was baffling to some people because it's not a terribly expensive feature, and it was a feature in previous cars by Tesla, the Model S and the Model X. So what gives? Why no rain sensor in the Model 3? It turns out that their plan was, and what they actually did, was capture data from people as they drive to see when they turn the wipers on, and then cross-reference that with data from the cameras. After all, the car already has cameras for self-driving capability. So by reusing those cameras, by putting them to another use, it was able to detect rain. It was able to figure out the pattern of what rain looks like through the camera and then engage the wipers automatically. And presumably, if people are fighting with that system, if they notice that the windshield is wet and the cameras have not detected rain, the person's going to turn on the wipers. Well, that's going to improve the pattern recognition that the system has over time. Another good example of put to another use is an adorable feature, the dog mode. And the dog mode is a way to keep your pet comfortable using battery power to run the heating and air conditioning system while you leave the car unattended. You set dog mode and Fluffy is comfortable until you get back. So that puts to another use a whole range of features inside the vehicle that you couldn't do with a gas-powered car. You couldn't leave a gas-powered car idling for an hour while you shopped. And yet, because you have the battery and the air conditioning system in the car, and you can put them to another use as a comfortable pet habitat. The other thing they put to another use during dog mode is they light up the display to say that the vehicle is in dog mode, to reassure passersby that the pet inside the vehicle is actually comfortable and safe. The E in Scamper is for eliminate. Coming back to the Model 3, they've eliminated just about every button, every dial, every display, every needle in that car in favor of a touch panel in the center of the dashboard. This eliminates a lot of components inside the car, and it also means that the features can be doled out carefully through the screen. And so if the car is someday able to drive itself and able to be loaned out as an Uber, for example, it means that people can't get into the glove compartment because you would lock that feature out. You can only open the glove box through the touch panel. So if you're renting the vehicle out, you would presumably lock that feature down so people don't either take what's in the glove box or inadvertently leave something behind in the glove box. Another example of eliminate is Tesla has eliminated the dealer network from its business model. Every other competing automaker manufactures cars, but they sell through a dealer network, a third party to the customer. And this is a business model that has endured for decades because the customer is happy to have a place to take their car and get relatively frequent service, unlike an electric car where it pretty much runs on its own. You don't have to do a lot of maintenance to it. So having that dealer is reassuring to the customer, and the dealer is happy because they get a lot of business in terms of repairs. But again, because electric cars don't need a lot of maintenance, the dealer network would then want to make a big markup on every car it sold, and Tesla didn't want to go down that road, so instead they decided to forego a dealer network altogether. This is an example of eliminate. The final letter in the word scamper is R, and R stands for reverse or rearrange. A good example of this from Tesla is the way they've rearranged the rear doors in the Tesla Model X. The Model X can be configured as a 7 and I think even possibly an 8 passenger vehicle, which is to say 3 rows. If you need to get in and out of the second row or the third row in an SUV, particularly in a confined space like a garage, that can be quite awkward. If you're trying to put children in a car seat, it's very difficult. I can say this from experience. I have a Ford Edge. You can barely get the doors open in the garage, and if you do, you're worried about slamming it against the wall and damaging it. And thank goodness my son is old enough not to need a car seat anymore, but I remember those days, and you basically had to back out of the garage to do it. The Falcon Wing doors do a good job of not only opening in confined space, but they also can flip up out of the way and make it possible to almost stand while you're working on clipping a child into a car seat, for example, or if you're trying to get in and out of the third row, which can be quite awkward as well in confined spaces. So this is an example of rearranging for a competitive advantage. A typical problem with brainstorming is that you get a group of people in the room and you say, okay, we need ideas. Any idea is good. There's not going to be any criticism, but I need multiple ideas and I need them to be in a variety. The problem with that is that the earliest and loudest voices tend to dominate the room, and it starts to feel like you don't have any new ideas. All you have is modifications of existing ideas that have already come out. A tool like Scamper, whether you're alone or in a group, lets you focus your attention at different points on the problem spectrum. It lets you apply different tools, and so what you wind up with is a variety of solutions. I hope this has piqued your interest in the Scamper technique. If it has, check the show notes below. I have a free downloadable and printable guide that you can use to reference and come up with new ideas on your own. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe. I'll have more repeatable genius techniques that you can apply to solve problems in your life, in your business, and in your career. Thank you.